how to meet your dark side and then love them. And so I'm so excited about today's conversation because we are going to be diving into the 6 tools or the 6 practices for you to go through these shadow aspects of yourselves. People like to call them shadow work. And why this conversation became so intriguing for us. You guys all know Ayana and I love the dark side. We love shedding light onto it. But what was really interesting is that Kelly had brought to our attention that, it has become such this buzzword of doing shadow work. And so where do you begin? And one of the best tools that we love to always encourage people to do is journal. But is that actually enough? If you've done enough of the journaling, and do you need more? Like, what more can you do to really meet this side of yourselves? And you just brought up some really, really great points. So, Kelly, welcome so much. And I would just love to learn from you. Why do you feel it's so important to really share more about what shadow work means and what that looks like?
Yeah, I think especially for folks who are on a spiritual path or are doing work to, really try to get rid of all of these old patterns and limiting beliefs that are like keeping us from being our best selves. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the sense of like being really heavy in the metaphysical world. It can be just folks who are doing regular work and trying to better themselves and get through the slog and like live their best, most fulfilled lives. And I think that so much of what is holding us back is a lot of those old patterns and traumas and things that maybe necessarily we don't even understand are affecting us, but are. And there's certain connects that I think every person has insecurities around, whether it's your body or certain aspects to your personality, things that have happened that you're really embarrassed or ashamed of. And I think that only through really directly confronting those things and really getting to know them and accept them, that you can start to utilize them in order to get your power back. There's a lot of power in really knowing your whole self as opposed to just being a love and light being, right? Because we can't all be in the light all the time. It's just not realistic. It's not nature. Nature is both dark and light. And I think that we avoid the dark because it's painful and it hurts and it's yucky and it's mucky. And I think that that's where our biggest lessons are. And so for me, shadow work, being this buzzword, right? People hear shadow work and they think that it's just like asking hard questions or remembering past pains and traumas. But it can be a lot more than just confronting those things and like naming them. And sometimes it has to be a lot more of a physical action as opposed to just like sitting and journaling memories and thoughts and feelings.
I love what you shared, that it's really a layer deeper than just journaling. That journaling sometimes is the start, but then where does it go? Or how can we express it through our body and in our being? And that, we try to avoid the shadow. I have really experienced that. I have really felt that. I feel like society perpetuates that, trying to push us into be happy all the time, or if you're not, you're oversensitive, or what's
Mhm.
wrong with you? Why don't you feel good? Why do you feel unhappy? And so we shut those sides of ourselves away. We put them in the dark, in a place where we can't see them, in a place where we think that they can no longer touch us. But the reality is that those shadows are actually running the show. And that's really what I was faced with. I thought I was living in the love and in the light because that is the story that I told myself and I told others. And it wasn't until I became faced with my shadows that I realized they have been deciding everything for me. Every decision that I've made, every man that I've dated, right? Like every career that I was going for, the money in my bank account, the way that I spent, everything was run by
Mm-hmm.
my shadows. And so realizing that avoiding them is never the solution. If anything, you're actually allowing them to run the show. So it's how do we take back control? How do we take back our power? How do we face our shadows and we say, hey, you are allowed to be here? Because that's what it takes. Saying you're allowed to be here, I see you, I care for you. I appreciate what you've been protecting me from. That's
Mm-hmm.
when we can start having a conversation. And that's when you can start changing the narrative and also changing the impact. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And I would really like to ask you, so what comes after journaling?
Yeah, a really great jumping off point that I personally use and continue to use on a constant basis is mirror work, which is also another thing that I think a lot of people have heard of or have heard some version of mirror work. But it specifically when I utilize it in my shadow work practices, it's really sort of more of a mirror confrontation. And it's as simple as you can start with however much time you have, but it can be really confronting. People don't sort of understand the depth of like staring at yourself for longer than, 20, 30 seconds, and staring at yourself intentionally with, certain thoughts in your head of what you're focusing on, as opposed to just like sitting in the mirror and doing your makeup, right? It's um, the way that I began, I could only really do like 5 minutes at a time, would be sitting in the mirror full body so that I could see everything, every single thing that I hated about my body or had been taught to hate about my body. And staring into my left eye first for the first couple of minutes and really just sitting with myself, letting every thought that was coming through, every impulse to look away come through, accept it, but then stay. And it was the longest 2 minutes of my life. And then having to move through and start from top to bottom, and which is how I like to do it. It's sort of that, it mirrors that descent ascent for me, is starting from the top of my head all the way down to my toes and confronting every single thing on my body that I dislike and going slowly. So starting with, for example, like I hate my split ends, right? That's a really like easy place to start because it's the top of your head. And then
Sorry.
sitting with that, right? Like, why do I hate my split ends? Why
Yeah.
do I have to
So
start like, right? I
when,
know it sounds ridiculous.
no, it's just when you said this, like what came up was the movie Mean Girls. It's like,
Mm,
I really have bad breath in the morning, but anyways,
right?
as
Make
you
no
were just
beds
saying.
suck.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. But then sitting with those thoughts, right? So not like just glossing over and being like, oh God, I hate my eyes or I hate the shape of this. It's sitting and going, why is that a thing? Like, why do I hate that? Where does that story come from? And then having to kind
Mm,
of go down that path in your thought and not moving on until you've hit that point of recognition and acceptance of like, oh, okay, I get why that's a thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that's healed yet, but the fact that I can name it now, powerful. Okay, let's move to the next. And so it can be a really lengthy process if you have the time to commit to it. It's really powerful to be able to do the whole thing at once. But even starting with 5 minutes and just starting with a couple of your big, really glaring ones, right? Like I hate my belly. I hate this thing. Why is it on my body? And then starting to all those stories that we're told, right? Our society has told me I should hate this. Why do I believe that? Because of X, Y, Z. So it can go really in depth, but starting there, really confronting those things and really, really naming them is extremely powerful. Especially in starting to like question those then. So like the next time that I'm like, that's bullshit. I love this. Like, like it's just, yeah, it's a really great place to start just to sort of start transmuting some of those stories.
I think based off of what you were both sharing and the overall theme is getting to even know that part of yourself. And what is very interesting about staring at yourself in the mirror and then because normally you're not saying out loud like, oh, I hate this or I hate that. It is this running voice that's in the back of your head and you're denying it. Or at least when I was first doing this work, like I would hear these and I would pretend that these voices were not saying it because I knew that it was bad, quote unquote, right? I knew that it was ridiculous, but that does not mean that my subconscious doesn't genuinely feel that way. And that's where then you start showing up in through insecurity when you're out in public with other people, right?
Exactly.
And so the the challenge here is when these things are coming through, own it and
Mm,
say it out loud. Like say, like my arms or my boobs or my nose or whatever it is. But and these are just so physical that we're talking about, and that's just the intention of this specific mirror gazing practice, because there are other aspects of, you know, shadow work that we'll be diving into as well. But that is the first thing, is that once you're actually acknowledging this part of yourself, is when you can start understanding that, oh, this energy has a life of its own. It has a mind of its own, an opinion of its own. And when you can acknowledge them as a separate entity, then that is where the power is. You get to decide, well, now I know you. Like, I know you, and I don't want to be enemies with you. Let's be allies. And that is the beginning of then you saying, well, now I can stand up for myself and be like, actually, that's not true. Like, where did I hear this story? Or where did you hear this story where you're now imposing that belief into my life? And that is where the shift starts to take place. And so with that, we are going to be sharing 6 different tools for you to not only descend into these areas. I don't even want to use the word descend, but really going deeper into the dark night of your soul. And we're going to help you love it down there. And then we're also going to help you find the ladder to take the steps one by one carefully and be excited about your climb, but also looking down and not having had been afraid or hate the fact that you were just there. But this is really going to allow you to know that I can climb down whenever I want, but I have the tools to climb back up just as easily. So, Ayana, please share with us, where can people join us in this amazing conversation?
Oh my God, I'm so fired up and I'm so excited to at the metaphor that you just gave. I felt it like I was going down and then I was climbing up the ladder step by step. And it's really, we're going to go deep. And that's what shadow work is. That is the point. And we're going to also share with you, like, we're not just going to leave you down there. We're going to support you in supporting yourself and climbing back out and in loving the experience. So join us this Friday on Clubhouse. You can find the links in our bios and just experience the magic of this conversation and come with your questions. Really allow us to go deeper through your questions, share your experiences, and we can really just share where we're at and how we get out of it and support one another through it with these tangible tools. I'm so, so excited. We will see you on Friday.